Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into a very intricate situation. We're looking at personal stories, medical records, professional life, all to understand this complex picture.
It is complex. We're trying to connect the dots, essentially, between military service, some really serious health challenges, and then these quite disturbing allegations of stalking and maybe data breaches.
Exactly, and it all centers around one person, Onagh Hopke. She's a U.S. Air Force veteran, background in IT, project management. Pretty impressive stuff.
Right, and her experiences, as we've sort of pieced together from the sources, they really bring up some big questions, don't they? About personal security, how sensitive data gets handled.
Or not handled.
Or not handled, yeah. And just the sheer challenge of, getting healthcare as a veteran, navigating that system.
Yeah, this isn't just about laying out events A, B, C. It's about seeing how these things connect: battlefield trauma, personal relationships, the digital world, dealing with huge bureaucracies like the VA.
We want to pull out the key insights, look at where the vulnerabilities might be, and, well, the fight for just individual agency in all of this.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Her early military service. She enlists in the Air Force, 1987 to 1990, starts as an E-2 at Shaw Air Force Base.
Right, Shaw AFB in South Carolina. And pretty early on, 1988, there's a major health event, a surgical diagnosis, stage 2 endometriosis.
And the sources make a direct link, don't they, between this diagnosis and military sexual trauma, MST?
They do, and that's, well, it's critical. We know trauma like MST can have profound physical effects. Science is catching up to this, linking it to chronic pain conditions like endo.
So it's not just a coincidence. It points to maybe a bigger issue in how the impact of trauma was being handled or understood back then.
Potentially, yes. And we see this theme of trauma's physical fallout recurring throughout her story. It raises serious questions.
And unfortunately, it gets worse during that time. While deployed to Luke Air Force Base in '89, the sources detail experiences of rape and abuse by someone called JD.
Horrific. And there's that detail, that specific instance where she actually begged weapons technicians not to essentially return her to him.
Which suggests other people might have known or at least suspected what was happening. It's just awful.
It really is. Yet she finishes her service, gets an honorable discharge in 1990, rank E4.
So these traumatic events happen during her service. They're linked to this chronic health condition. It really highlights the potential long-term effects, visible and invisible.
Absolutely. And the difficulty someone faces trying to process that kind of personal pain while also serving their country.
Okay, so after the military, those health struggles, they don't just go away. They seem to ramp up significantly between 91 and 2005. Multiple surgeries for the endometriosis.
Yeah, that one in June 91. An 8-hour surgery. Think about that. Removing 6 cysts, reconstructive work.
And then another diagnosis on top of it, adenomyosis.
Right, where the uterine lining grows into the muscle wall. So more pain, more complexity. It really does sound relentless.
It does. And the treatments. She was in clinical trials for Lupron Depot back in '91. That was pretty experimental then, wasn't it?
Very. And the side effects mentioned are significant: aches, pains, migraines, night sweats. It paints a picture of this cycle, surgery, experimental drugs, side effects.
Trying anything to get relief, presumably.
Exactly. And it raises questions about, well, women's health research and treatment options back then, especially for veterans.
Yeah.
The choices patients face, sometimes the treatment itself is a huge burden.
Then there was Depo-Provera from 97 to 99, leading to weight gain. Another side effect impacting her life, her relationships later on.
And then the hysterectomy in 2000, you'd hope that might be, a turning point.
But it wasn't the end of it. The procedure confirmed chronic aggressive reoccurring endometriosis and type 1 ovarian cancer, stage 1.
Just one thing after another. And the endometriosis even recurred in 2004 in her sinuses. That's incredibly unusual.
It required more surgery. And then the floor drops out in 2005.
Yeah. Lost all insurance. Hit a $3 million lifetime cap.
$3 million.
Can you imagine, after years of battling this, needing constant care, and suddenly nothing, no safety net?
So she had to stop all formal medical treatment, just stop.
Left to manage this incredibly complex, painful condition entirely on her own. It's hard to fathom the desperation.
That loss of insurance feels like such a pivotal, devastating moment. And it's around this time, or starting a bit before, that another disturbing threat emerges: the stalking.
Right. Starts subtly in 2003. Things moved in her apartment, just enough to make her feel uneasy, violated.
But then it escalates, doesn't it? In 2004, a garage break-in, a knick-knack left on her bed. Creepy stuff.
Very. And that single piece of mail junk mail, basically, but sent to her new unlisted address, becoming this chilling place marker. It showed a sustained effort to track her.
That sustained tracking, it really creates this atmosphere of constant threat.
And maybe that sense of personal violation primed her, in a way, to be hyper-aware of other kinds of violations later, like potential data issues.
The stalking didn't stop when she moved either. She goes to Las Vegas in 2007, and it continues.
Relentless pursuit, yeah. Then that bizarre twist in late 2007, contact from someone calling themselves the audio thief.
Who turns out to be the stalker,
Yeah.
but incapacitated by some medical trauma.
Exactly. A very strange development. And then a direct confrontation, or believed confrontation, with the stalker in August 2009.
So this intense period of health crisis, loss of insurance, and being stalked, it's an unbelievable amount of pressure.
Immense pressure. And that brings us to another really concerning part of her story, detailed under the heading, "And No One Came." This is 2009.
Right. She has an affair, late summer, late fall. And the person seems, well, unusually interested in her past.
Extremely interested. It becomes clear his motivation, or a key motivation, was filling in blanks on her DD-214, her military discharge papers.
The DD-214, that's like your whole service summary, right?
Exactly. So
Yeah.
asking about basic training, Lackland, tech school, these aren't just casual get-to-know-you questions. It feels like intelligence gathering.
And suspicion centers on this name, Don Stoffner. She notices he uses these keywords about her service that are almost right, but not quite.
Yeah, like near-miss keywords.
Yeah.
Close enough to show he has some information, maybe from a database, but he doesn't truly understand it. Like maybe it was badly translated or he just skimmed it.
That's so close but completely wrong thing. That's what clicks for her, isn't it? Especially with the 1994 earthquake details.
Yes. He reveals details about the earthquake that were too specific, too accurate for him to just know randomly. For her, that was proof. Proof that some government database must have been breached.
Because how else would he know that level of detail about her experience during that event? It's not just a public fact, it's personal context.
Precisely. And think about the implication. If that detail is out there, what else is? It's a chilling thought about data security.
She even tries to test him, right?
Yeah.
Using a memory from South Carolina looking for a reaction.
Uh-huh. A trap, essentially. And his reaction felt wrong. The wrong rhythm, she called it. Confirmed he wasn't who she might have initially thought.
But then he mentions something that really scares her.
Yes. A top-secret training mission in Florida. That specific mention triggered intense fear.
And then tailhook.
Yeah. Referencing the tailhook scandal that suggests access to her full military file, way beyond a standard DD-214. Sensitive stuff.
Given your knowledge of military stuff, how likely is it a civilian could get that level of detail? What would that imply?
Well, it shouldn't happen. Access like that implies a serious breach, potentially involving classified information. The implications are significant. National security level concerns.
And that's the crux of, and no one came. Despite these huge red flags, a civilian, maybe with foreign ties, accessing potentially classified data, she felt like, nobody intervened.
She expected some authority, someone to step in, given what was being discussed, but silent.
Which raises massive questions about how secure this information really is. A disturbing disconnect.
A huge disconnect. Okay, so let's jump forward a bit to 2013. Now she's trying to engage with the VA system for healthcare.
And it's a mess from the start. They have her listed as male, no record of enlistment.
Just basic fundamental errors in the system. Imagine trying to get care when they don't even have your gender right or acknowledge you served.
So how did she finally get a claim through? Around 2015 in Santa Barbara?
It was strategic, almost like gaming the system. She saw her record had an incorrect header, some wrong info already in there. So she matched her claim information to that incorrect header, knowing it was wrong, but hoping it would get processed within their flawed system. She called it hacking the data.
Wow. So basically, using the system's errors against itself to get recognized. What does that say about the VA's data integrity back then?
It says it was likely pretty poor, and it shows the extraordinary lengths some veterans might have to go to just to get their foot in the door.
And even when she gets the benefits award letter, the VA eligibility person, Linda, at Loma Linda, she doesn't believe it.
Disbelief, suspicion, questioning if the letter was even real. It just highlights the bureaucratic nightmare and, frankly, the lack of trust she faced.
And getting actual care for the endometriosis, especially linking it to her MST, that remained a battle. Allegations of care being deliberately withheld at the Louisville VAMC.
Yeah, particularly care related to the MST, which suggests potentially a systemic bias or failure to properly address trauma-related conditions.
It got so bad she was put on the Disruptive Behavior Committee for complaining about not getting care.
That's what the sources indicate, essentially being punished for advocating for herself. It's a deeply concerning situation for any patient.
So she started seeking care secretly through Medicare.
As a way to document the denials, yeah. To build a case, have a parallel record showing what the VA wasn't providing, it shows a complete breakdown of trust in the VA providing her care.
And even recently, 2024, medication adjustments held, but consistent care for the root issues. Still elusive.
Still a struggle, it seems.
And there's that other piece, the DD-214 again. Her unit assignment is still redacted.
Still redacted, yeah. Linked to her time in a special operations group and having a top secret clearance.
So even now, she needs a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act, just to get her own unit assignment. How does that impact things?
It creates a barrier, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Accessing her own history. And potentially hinders getting the right care if that assignment is relevant to, say, environmental exposures or specific service risks. It raises questions about transparency versus long-lasting security protocols.
Throughout all this intense medical and bureaucratic struggle, relationships were obviously affected too.
Yes, the sources mention a barracks marriage early on, more for convenience, and her second marriage faced huge strains because of the health issues, disagreements about treatment.
It really underscores how chronic illness impacts everything, including the closest human connections.
Absolutely. The sources acknowledge that complexity, the strain it puts on relationships.
Now, let's not forget her background. This whole time, she has this extensive career in IT project management. Big companies, Amgen, Clearwire, Win, MGM Mirage.
Right. Her expertise is in data management, security, navigating complex systems. That's crucial context.
How do you think that background influenced how she dealt with the VA? Or how she interpreted the whole Dawn Stavner situation?
Oh, profoundly, I'd imagine. She'd understand databases, security protocols, inconsistencies. She'd see red flags someone else might miss. Her professional skills gave her a lens, an analytical framework to understand these bureaucratic and data puzzles.
Having seen complex data systems in the private sector, how might the VA issues or the suspected breach have looked to her, based on her experience?
Probably quite alarming. Private sector companies, especially those she worked for, often have rigorous data security. Seeing potential government database flaws or the VA's data errors, it would likely seem amateurish or negligent compared to what she knew professionally.
It gave her the tools to hack the data, as she put it, and also to recognize the potential severity of the Stavner incident.
Exactly. Her career experience isn't just a footnote. It's key to understanding her perspective and actions.
And finally, the sources mention these triggers. Moments where the past trauma just floods back, like a restaurant visit in 2017 near Luke AFB.
Yeah, bringing back vivid, terrifying memories of the abuse from 1989. It shows how trauma lingers, how seemingly random things can just unlock those experiences years later.
Underscores the need for really sensitive long-term care for people with MST histories.
Definitely.
Okay, so wrapping this deep dive up, what are the main takeaways? It feels like this story sits right at the intersection of, well, personal vulnerability, potential system failures in data security, in veteran health care, and just the long shadow of trauma.
I agree. And what stands out to me is her persistence, her individual agency. Despite everything thrown at her, the sources show Onagh Hopke consistently documenting, questioning, advocating for herself within these incredibly difficult systems.
It's quite remarkable. So here's something we'll leave our listeners thinking about. What does it mean when potentially classified info might be floating around and people trying to navigate these huge systems face such immense barriers, all while dealing with the after effects of service and trauma?
And what happens when a situation seems to cry out for intervention, maybe even involving national security, and it feels like no one came? What's the responsibility of our institutions then?
How much responsibility do they have to protect the privacy, the health, the well-being of the people they're supposed to serve?
These are big, complex questions, and we've really only touched the surface today. We definitely encourage everyone listening to reflect on these themes: veteran care, data privacy, MST, maybe look into them further.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.